Peace. What's good, YouTube? It's your man Kareem back again with another video. Alright, so today we're going to be part 2ing the law of detachment from the Tao Te Ching. And, some chapters, some verses from the Tao Ching part of the Tao Te Ching. And pretty much we're just going to be explaining how some of these things, relate to the law of detachment in my interpretation as well. And me diving deep and explaining some of the things and how it can possibly help you benefit yourself and see where you can pull from it and use it for transformation. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So verse 45 of the Tao Te Ching. The way can be spoken of, but it will not be the constant way. The name can be named, but it will not be the constant name. The nameless was the beginning of the myriad creatures, but the named was the mother of the myriad creatures. Hence, constantly rid yourself of desires in order to observe its subtlety. But constantly allow yourself to have desires in order to observe what it is after. These two have the same origin, but different in name. They are both called dark, darkness upon darkness, the gateway to all that is subtle. The subtle part of us, right, the subconscious mind, is something that is balanced, and it's detached from this matrix in the sense that the only things that get fed to the subconscious mind are symbols and trauma and repetition, right? And then beyond the subconscious mind is the dark side of us, and that dark side is the shadow, the darkness, and whatever goes into the darkness comes out as light. And so when we detach and we pull ourselves away from the distractions, right, and we go into the darkness, we can truly understand what subconscious really is. We can truly start to observe and put into our subconscious what we decide to put into our subconscious on our own volition. That is why the darkness is called that which is subtle, because it was always there. It was always the beginning, and before it wasn't called anything, right? But the darkness, if we actually pull back away from all these things that we occupy our conscious mind with, we can see the truth. We can see the truth in why we want what we want, and we can see the truth in why we are what we are. And you can do that simply because of the fact that you can observe yourself means that you are beyond what you think you are. You're beyond with just this flesh and bones. This flesh and bones is only 1% of you, and the rest of you is beyond all of this. The rest of you is more than what you can observe with your two eyes, right? And you can only see that when you detach from this video game that you've been playing for so long, right? And 47 goes on to say, not to honor men of excellence will keep the people from contention. Not to value goods that are hard to come by will keep the people from going left. Not to display what is desirable will keep the people from being unsettled. Hence, in his rule, the sage empties their minds but fills their bellies, weakens their purpose but strengthens their bones. He constantly keeps the people innocent of knowledge and free from desire, and causes the clever not to dare. He simply takes no action, and everything is in order, right? This is really self-explanatory, but from my point of view, it's just another way of saying you don't have to wear your achievements on your sleeves. You don't have to walk around with a mask on for people to understand who and what you are. And what this is saying is that you need to just be, right? And in being, you want to let your mind be clear. And an empty mind is one that's free from mind control, from the mind control that is pushed upon us every day, right? And when we buy into it, our mind becomes cluttered, right? So what we have to understand is that when we close our eyes and we go into meditation, that's when we block out 99.9% of input that the subconscious mind gets. And when we just focus on that darkness, that's when we can really push away everything, and we become the observer in doing that, right? We become mindful in doing that. When we do that more often, the more often that we close the gap between ourselves and the darkness, and the true self, the more often that we close that gap, the more we become in control of our minds, right? And In doing so, we become strengthened spiritually, because that's where your main strength is. Your main strength is spiritual. Physical strength is pales in comparison to your spiritual strength. So in doing so, right, you will recognize that once your mind is in your control and it's not in anyone else's control, it's not constantly being bent to the wills and the desires, the lower desires of the body. It's not being bent to the expectations of society, but your mind is bending to you and is being controlled by you. When your mind is in that place, that's when you can really begin to recognize that everything will be taken care of by your higher self. Everything will be taken care of by God, right? That's when your mind bends to you. See, your mind is supposed to submit to you. You are not supposed to submit to your mind, right? You are not at the beck and call of your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings. Your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings are nothing more than information. But when we start to over-identify with these things, that's when our mind begins to rule us. You should be ruling your mind. It should be the other way around. The same way that you should be ruling your body, disciplining your body, and not bending to every beck and call that your body has, every lust and desire that your body has. Your body tells you, oh, I want sex. Oh, I want to watch porn. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. Give me food. And in fasting from the lower nature, in fasting from sexual desire, in fasting from filling our bellies with more food, overeating, in fasting in general, right? Fasting from our impulses, fasting from the need to be approved by others on social media, or even outside of social media, right? Fasting from all of that and really just taking time to just focus on our own essence. In fasting from that, that's when we gain control over the mind. That's when we gain control over the body. Not saying you have to fast from sexual desire forever. Not saying you have to fast, from food forever, right? But you want to be able to say no when you want to say no, rather than when your body tells you that you need something. No, everything is in your control, including your body and its desires. You want to make everything a choice, including what your body and your mind want from you, because it's all within your control. It's not ruling you. There's no such thing as having needs. You only have choices, and whatever choices you make as a perfect being, they only become needs when you buy into them and when you submit to them. But you don't necessarily need anything, because when you pass away, all you have is your mind, right? So whether you're in control of that or not is up to you. It's up to you to get into control of that. Up to you to learn about the subconscious mind. Up to you to train and discipline your body. Right? It's up to you, because when you do all those things, spirit falls right in your control too. So next verse gets into, it says, heaven and earth are enduring. The reason why heaven and earth can be enduring is that they do not give themselves life. Hence they are able to be long lived. Hence the sage puts his person back and comes to the fore. Treats his person as extraneous, and it is preserved. Is it not because he is without thought of self that he is able to accomplish his private ends? This is all talking about over-identification with the body, over-identification with the thoughts, over-identification with the feelings, and with the emotions. Everything that describes ego, this is all talking about that. What separates the sage and heaven and earth, what separates that from the layman, is that the layman, all he is focused on is sustaining his own life. Life is the only thing that he knows. He only knows how to keep the ego alive. And anything about spirit either scares him or he eludes it. Right? It sounds untranslatable to him, because he is so focused on survival. So that's what it's telling you. When you start to really let go of being in tune with, submitting to your body, with submitting to sustaining the ego, right? And you start to focus on what your spirit is telling you to do. And if you believe in a God, you start to focus on whatever that God is telling you to do, right? That's when you begin to really understand that in general, everything that you thought you needed was nothing more than a distraction. And it was nothing more than you didn't need it in the first place. You trained yourself to think that you needed it, right? And when you put away this false perception that you have of yourself, and you really start to step into the shoes of who you know you're supposed to be, everything falls into place. It's just, I can only explain it so much, right? But everything truly does fall into place, you know. And when you start to really put the ego where in its place and where it's supposed to be, and you start to step into the role of spirit, you'll realize that you already have abundance. Because when you are focused on sustaining the ego, right, you are telling yourself that whatever the universe has to give you, however the universe is going to provide for you, you're basically giving off that energy that it's not enough, that it won't happen. You're telling, if you believe in God, you're telling God that his provisions aren't enough for you. Her provisions aren't enough for you. Right? And that's how you end up selling yourself short of your own blessings. Because you are trying to follow a path, you are trying to submit to a path that is not conducive to your spiritual transformation. That's not conducive to your purpose. That's why it's important to really take a step back. Yeah, and I know life gets busy. It's important to take a step back and really just ask yourself, am I who I know I'm supposed to be right now? Am I doing what I know I will really have to be doing right now? Or did I die a few years ago and and my body's just kept going on? Right? That's why they say that the sage puts his person back and comes to the fore. Treats his person as extraneous, and it is preserved. Right? When you put this ego, when you put this body as something outside of who you really are, when you put the spirit to the forefront, and you put the body in its position, right? That's when you begin to really tap into the true self. The true self is what's within, right? So that's what we really have to understand. That's what I was getting from this verse. And the next one goes on to say, that which is most good is like water. It is because water is not only good at benefiting the myriad creatures, but also to dwell in the place detested by the multitude, that it comes close to the way. In a dwelling, it is the sight that is valued. In quality of mind, it is depth that is valued. In giving, it is like it being like heaven that is valued. In speech, it is good faith that is valued. In government, it is order that is valued. In affairs, it is ability that is valued. In action, it is timeliness that is valued. It is because that it does not contend that it is never at fault. Right? Just like I said in the video prior to this, when we begin to mirror the way that water is, that's when we become much more powerful. That's when we really begin to tap into who and what we really are. Water is the primordial origin of all things. That's why the ancient Egyptian god, right, is described as water. The god of primordial waters. And it's said to be the origin of all things. Primordial water is where it all begins. And so when we make our minds like water, and we observe all these things, we observe life, and we let life pass through. We observe our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. When we let those things pass through, when we let go, us being transparent, those things pass through us, but those things never attach to our essence. And then we begin to build up those volumes by building up our spirit, building up those volumes of water. That's when we can really begin to take action and have full control, right? Water has full control over a lot of things. And so when we make our minds like water, that's when we can really begin to have much more control, because water in its own state, it is naturally surrendered. So we want our minds to be naturally surrendered to our spirit. And we want our body to be naturally surrendered to our mind. That's where you make that body, spirit, and mind connection. And then in the unification of the three, which those things create a trinity, in the unification of all three of those things, that's when you begin to have full control by becoming like water. The next verse goes on to say that rather than fill to the brim by keeping it upright, better to have stopped in time, hammer it to a point, and the sharpness cannot be preserved always. There may be gold and jade filling the chamber, but there is no one who can keep them safe. To be overbearing when one has position and wealth is to bring calamity upon oneself. To retire when the task is accomplished is the way of heaven. And this is just saying, you can build as many resources, you can hoard as many resources, you can try to protect as many resources as you have in this life, right? But to attach to these things is to bring yourself ruin, because those things don't describe the abundance that you have within. They don't describe the wealth that you have within. Everything here, including your physical body, is going to pass away one day, right? And so that's why we want to tie our identity to the things that we have, to the people that we have, to the events that we put ourselves in, the environments that we put ourselves in. You want to tie yourself to anything. Like I said in the video about detachment with Gnosticism, be passerby, right? You want to let, even as many things as you accumulate in this life, you might accumulate a lot of nice things, but the minute that you over identify with them, that you attach to them, that you try to protect them as much, that's when you begin to give off the vibration that you have fear of losing these things. And that's where an unhealthy attachment is created, even in the slightest. And so we need to be aware. Attachments can rise up out of anything, because when we really begin to gain control over our mind, we start to have full control over our reality. We start controlling our lives. We'll get things. We'll start to transform things, and we'll get great things that we never even thought was possible to have, just because we focused on creating the reality that we want. And so, losing those things, that's when we really start to develop different fears, because now we're in a different state of rhythm. We're in a different vibration. So we start to develop different fears, because now that we move from a state of lacking to having, now we're scared of losing certain things. And so we really need to be cognizant. We need to walk in balance. When you walk in balance of mind, body, and spirit, and you start to realize that every success, and without success there can never be, or without failure there can never be success, right? And without gain or without loss there can never be gain. And you start to be balanced in those things, and you start to realize that those things are cyclical, and that it's all dependent on your mind. Which side of the spectrum that you experience to stay in, because as easy as it was for you to lose, it's going to be just as easy for you to gain, as easy as it was for you to make mistakes and fail. And if you see those things as lessons, that makes it even better for you to start succeeding again, because you're retraining your mind to stop seeing things so dualistically, because you're moving out of duality. So this is telling you to move out of duality and to really just walk in balance and reorder the way that your mind sees things, because once you move out of duality, that's when things start to come to you as well. So the next one goes on to say, 30 spokes share one hub, make nothing therein appropriate, and you will have the use of the cart. Knead clay in order to make a vessel, make the nothing therein appropriate, and you will have use of the clay vessel. Cut out doors and windows in order to make a room, make the nothing therein appropriate, and you will have use of the room. Thus we gain by making it something, but we have the use by making it nothing. That's very powerful, because let's be honest, it's not I'm going to use money as an example, right? Gaining money means nothing, because it can only give you more of what you already have. But when you start to put a different use to it, right? You put a different use to that nothing, even if it's a low amount of money that you just get from your job, you give it use, and it becomes something. The same way that something that other people don't value, right? Let's say, for example, you have something that you really enjoy doing, but it's not giving you any physical prosperity yet. You give it a use by bringing it into the light, and by making something out of nothing. Because in that nothing is the darkness, right? So every idea that we have, whenever we bring our ideas into the light, what we do with those ideas and our actions is what makes that nothing into something. It's what gives that nothing use, right? So, and that's essentially when we go into darkness and we start to realize that we can create create from the darkness out of light, right? We can create light out of that darkness, and we can create something out of nothing. It's all in our minds. So when we bring that to the forefront and we start to really recognize that all of these ideas, everything that we've always thought about, that we've always dreamed of, but that we never took action on, right? We start to take those tools and we start to apply them in the right places. That's what you do with your purpose. We might have been doubting our purpose for years. When we take our purpose and we start to apply it in the right ways, new things will pop up because you're tapping into your inner guidance by doing that purpose, right? And so the next one goes on to say, the 5 colors make man's eyes blind. Riding and hunting make his mind go wild with excitement. Goods are hard to come by. Serve to hinder his progress. The 5 tastes injure a man's palate. The 5 notes make a man's ear deaf. Hence in his rule the sage is for the belly, not for the eye. Thus he discards the one and takes the other. And this is saying that, everything that we think that we know is only 1%. And so just us attaching to what we perceive and the way that we sense things, just us attaching to this way of thinking, this way of experiencing life, and not really fathoming that there's something greater, right? When we attach to this, we stop seeing the spiritual realm because we've over-identified with the physical realm. And so that's what it's telling you. It's telling you that everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything that you experience with these senses, it's so limited. And it's meant for the lessons that you learn here. Don't get me wrong. The physical existence has its place, but what this is telling you is that there's more, and you can only see that when you realize just how deceived you've been in over-identifying with this way of life, over-identifying with your limited perception, right, and starting to fathom something more. You can only do that by gaining knowledge and transforming that knowledge into wisdom, understanding, and really just using it as your own personal understanding and raising light from within you. And then the next verse goes on to say, favor and disgrace are like being startled. Honor is a great trouble like your body. What is meant by saying that favor and disgrace are like being startled? Favor being that which, when bestowed on a subject, serves to startle as much as when withdrawn. This is what is meant by saying that favor and disgrace are like being startled. What is meant by saying honor is like a great trouble like your body? The reason I have great trouble is that I have a body. When I no longer have a body, what trouble have I? Hence, he who values putting his person in order more than putting the empire in order can be given the custody of the empire. He who grudges using his person for putting the empire in order can be trusted with the empire. And so this is telling you that in duality, we see that all things lead in the experience of duality, in the experience of the human existence, we see that all things, they generally lead to the same thing, right? As much favor as you gain, right? As much fame as you gain, as much status as you gain, as much money as you gain, there's always going to be some kind of flaw, right? There's always going to be something that pulls you back in the other direction, right? And so just as much as you gain those things, once it's taken away, it's like you gain nothing. Or in other areas, you might have gained nothing, right? And so that's the result of being detached, being in duality, right? That's the result of being detached from your real nature. And in general, the reason why is because while you have a body, right, just like it says, you have trouble. Let's be honest. Everything that we do to sustain our body is going out of our way, right? And that's what we center our lives around, sustaining the body. Eat, sleep, take a shit. And everything in existence and most of our lives is geared towards doing those things comfortably. And so we have to spend 99.9% of our time, no, not even that, 100% of our time, trying to do those things comfortably. And that's what gives us the trouble. That's the flaw, because we can't just be while we have a body. While you have a body, you have to occupy yourself with something all the time. And so that's what gives you the trouble. But when you start to detach, and you value self or more than you value gaining things outside of the self, right? In this matrix, when you value the true self, when you value that more than you value the false self or the physical self, that's when you can begin to start gaining differently, gaining in a spiritual sense. That's where the real gain is actually made. All the gain that you make in this matrix is nothing more than a lower form of your gaining, right? And now it's important to master the matrix, because if you can't master the matrix, how can you master your mind? How can you master the reality beyond the matrix? You know, that's why you're here in the first place. You're here to graduate from the school called this matrix. And then the last one says, I attain the utmost emptiness, I keep to extreme stillness. The myriad creatures all rise together, and I watch thereby their return. The teeming creatures all return to their separate roots. Returning to one's roots is known as stillness. Stillness is what is called returning to one's destiny. Returning to one's destiny is normal, where knowledge of the normal is discernment. Not to know the normal is to be without basis. To innovate without basis bodes ill. To know the normal is to be tolerant. Tolerance leads to impartiality. Impartiality to kingliness to heaven to the way to perpetuity. And to the end of one's days, one will meet with no danger. And all of this comes simply because of the fact that you became still. And in becoming still, that's when we can really begin to tap in with our higher self, to tap in with the true self. And you can only really do that by detaching from this matrix. Everything that verse just said is all the snowball effect of focusing on what's within. And that's really all I have to say about that. I've kind of just repeated myself this entire video just in different ways, at least that I thought. But, when it comes to detachment, right? Detachment is just another form of shadow work, because you're going into the darkness and you're pulling out that light from within. And you can only do that when you stop focusing on the light that's distracting you outside when you have your eyes open. And so that's how you really do it. This is how you start to walk in between the two worlds, the subtle world and the physical world that you have to sustain yourself in, right? Through detachment, we can find our true selves. We can listen to the messages that have been going on this entire time that we've been trained to not recognize anymore, that we've been disconnected from, because we've been so plugged in. You got to plug into what's going on your phone. You got to plug into what's going on at work. You got to plug into what's going on at school. You got to plug into what's going on TV. But when do you ever begin to plug into what's going on within? Right? Detachment is how you do that. The law of detachment takes you away from everything that you're told to stay plugged into, the next type of culture that the world's moving towards, plugged into the new technology. Fuck all that shit. What about plugging into ourselves, plugging into our hearts and what our heart's desire is, plugging into our purpose, our higher purpose, God's purpose for us? What about that? That's what really matters here. But anyway, I'm not gonna read the whole book to you guys. Y'all can buy the Tao Te Ching. It's really cheap anyway. Buy the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu. I left the link in the description of the last video. I'll put it in this video too. Buy the Tao Te Ching, or maybe see if you can find it on PDF. I'm not gonna recommend any links because that's illegal. And yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed the video. And if you did, leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. If you're not subscribed, subscribe and turn notifications on so you get notified when I post fire content like this. I wish you all luck in your journey and peace.